Hi, I'm Ben McVicker, and this is my colleague, Joel Amores. We're from the infrastructure team here at Magellan. Today, we're going to talk about the core infrastructure strategy, which is a strategy that we've run since December of 2009. The strategy itself is a broad-based exposure to what we consider to be our really high-quality definition or selection of infrastructure assets. So Joel and I are two of the portfolio managers from the team. We have a five-person portfolio management team headed up by Gerald Stack, who is one of the founders, principals, if you will, of the infrastructure capability here at Magellan. It's important to note as well that the strategy and the way we operate is very much a collegiate approach to portfolio construction. The team itself has decades of experience in the space, straddling both private markets, public markets, but also across the various subsectors that we can invest in infrastructure. So toll roads, airports, and utilities as well. And so me personally, I've been at Magellan for a bit over 9 years today. During that time, I've become much more obviously acquainted with everything we do in our space. But when you think back to probably what my background is, I come from more of a utilities background. So previously I was working in a research department of an investment bank, covering Australian utilities businesses. So it gave me a really strong grounding in understanding what makes a good utilities business model and a poorer utilities business model.
Hi, I'm Joel Amores. Similar to Ben, I've got a long history in both infrastructure and at Magellan. I've been in the infrastructure space for over 2 decades and at Magellan for more than 10 years. Now, during that time, I'm proud to say we've been able to deliver some very attractive, reliable returns, all done in a low-risk manner. More importantly, our expectation is we can continue to deliver those returns well into the future, largely because we have an investment philosophy that's both simple yet disciplined in how we define infrastructure. Now, how do we define infrastructure? We define infrastructure as assets that are able to satisfy 2 criteria. Firstly, assets that provide an essential service to the critical running of any community. So as an example, water utilities. Customers rely on the ability to access water on an everyday basis, regardless of what's happening outside and what's happening in the economy. That extends to assets such as toll roads, airports, and communication infrastructure, assets that we rely upon to go about our everyday lives. The second are assets that have no significant direct exposure to 3 particular external factors: competition, commodity prices, and sovereign risk. Now, what does that mean? It means that we invest in companies that are highly monopolistic and aren't sensitive to the pressures of a competitive marketplace. As for commodity prices are very difficult to predict. So as you can imagine, we don't invest in companies with meaningful exposure to commodity prices, as they don't generate the type of returns that this strategy is after. And lastly, sovereign risk. Sovereign risk is simply our ability as shareholders to have our rights protected. So again, as you can imagine, we avoid investing in companies in places such as China. As I mentioned earlier, I've been working in this industry for over 2 decades. Now, in the earlier part of my career, much of the space was filled with companies with significant exposure to those 3 external factors that I mentioned. And what I noticed and what I observed were that many of those companies delivered vastly different investment outcomes compared to those pure play infrastructure companies. Now, it's not surprising that many of those same companies with those exposures no longer exist today and would subsequently fail our strict infrastructure definition.
And so taking what Joel's just talked about in terms of the investment philosophy that underpins our approach to infrastructure, the strategy itself is really aimed at delivering a diversified and thoughtfully constructed portfolio of these assets that really lives up to this definition of infrastructure. And so when you think about what I mean by diversified, first and foremost is this is a geographically diversified portfolio. So it's a globally diversified portfolio, whether that's the United States, Australia, but we do spread that exposure around. And second as well is about getting a thoughtful exposure to the various infrastructure subsectors. So airports, toll roads, water utilities, communications infrastructure, all are attractive assets that we find globally. So when we think about what this portfolio ultimately delivers from our experience, is that ultimately we think these types of assets should deliver attractive risk-adjusted returns under the nature of these businesses themselves. But second to which, we also expect they're going to do so in a really downside protected manner. These assets, as we talked about, are essential services. You don't stop using them just because it's a tough economic environment. So what we tend to find through history is that in a set of tough economic and market environments, you tend to find the strategy will outperform relatively against a falling market. But the flip side of that coin is that what we generally find is that in a roaring market and a really buoyant market set of conditions, you will find that the strategy is not going to keep pace with that fully. And so what we tend to find is that this strategy is more about delivering predictable and reliable returns in a more steady way through time. So with that, thank you for watching, and thanks very much.
Thank you.